What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. We have been busy. This bike has been re-pieced and torn apart more times than I can count the last 3 weeks than we have ever done the last 2 years along with the Dyna. We've really messed around with the old lowrider. And we are coming up on the 2-year anniversary with Old Burgundy. October 26, 2018 was the date that we decided to trade out our Dyna 2016 Dyna Street Bike, which was our first Harley-Davidson ever, first motorcycle, and we have hit the ground running. From the very first couple thousand miles that we had in the Dyna, we continued to grow to where we are at today. Had I known where I was going to be at today with the knowledge that I've gained thanks to everyone who's helped with countless messages, how-tos, and help along the way, truly grateful because now we've learned to do all of this. We've had no knowledge of motorcycles previously and now we're just grinding down, which brings us to today's video. We had the Legend suspension shock. Huge shout out to Hardcore Cycles for jumping on board and partnering up with that video, but we ended up selling it. It's going somewhere local to a fellow rider in the greater Austin area. And right now we're gonna be going back to our OEM FXLR monoshock. We have the bunking extension here on the bottom. You sit at approximately 13.5 inches roughly, that you're actually around 13.3, somewhere in that area between 13.3 13.45. It was interesting because the Legend shock, when I messaged the Legends, they said it was meant to be mirrored close to stock, and so in my head I thought that's as tall as it was ever gonna get. But once we extended the shock, it sat at a pretty good height. It was about 13.5. It was even taller than the OEM shock with the bunking extension. I was pleasantly surprised. But you may be asking yourself why we are getting rid of that shock if it's so great. Seems kind of sus, Connor. Well, the reason for that is because we want to go tall. I really enjoyed the 13.5 inch shock from Legend suspension, but we didn't need that whole air ride, the fanciness of up and down, down and up, and just the longevity of having an air hose or an air compressor on my bike with the countless miles that we do. Not saying that it wouldn't last, but again, that's an additional part that can fail versus a shock that if something breaks, I could probably just go ahead and send it, depending on which shock you get. I know with Olin's, you can get them rebuilt pretty much completely 100%. If one part fails, just send it off. They'll replace it, fix it, rebuild it, etc. I'm not too sure with the new shock that we're looking at, but that was the main reason why. That it just seemed too fancy for my riding, for what I really needed. So I figured, why not go ahead and let someone else pick it up? I messaged Hardcore Cycle and said, hey, would you prefer for me to return it to you or private sell it and then order the shock through you? And they were kind enough to say, private sell that sucker and then holler at me whenever you have the money for the new shock. So again, huge thank you to Hardcore Cycles. Be sure and give them a follow on Instagram, as well as check out their site at hardcorecyclesinc.com. What shock are we getting? Well, that's gonna be a little bit of a surprise. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know, we've talked about it several times. I even did a post about it and tagged them. But what we're doing today, in order for this swing arm right here, we've torn it apart. It's free to move around right now because we've loosened it. We don't have anything going on. This was the first time I've done this, and it was a little intimidating because I was like, dude, this is gonna break my bike. If any Harley techs are watching, this is not my bike. We are in a different country other than the United States, so if this bike happens to come across your dealership, it was not me, it was not here, it was not in this video, it does not exist. Moving on. That in order to go taller than 13.7 inches, you do have to do some modification to your bike. This is where a lot of people have a bit of a gray area. People get real sus and don't want to and get kind of turned off by it, where we were asking about it, and some people were quick, a little bit snarky even, that they were like, oh, you have to shave your frame, there's no point in doing that, and so forth, so forth. I said, well, no point in trying, idle hands and whatnot. We said, we're gonna do it, because we want to go taller. And then a couple people would be like, there's no real reason for you to go taller, but again, that's kind of where I want the bike to just be a little bit taller. So we're gonna go ahead and explore at the expense of FXLR Burgundy, getting a little bit of surgery and just getting those tabs ground down. Now, which tabs are going to be grounded down? We've already done so because we were exploring, we were experimenting, and we wanted to get all that without the added pressure of recording, because a lot of times when we record, if you are a moto vlogger, just vlogger in general, you know that whenever you start recording, you're ready for a fire video. We are talking fast in this video. I do apologize. We're just excited. I'm amped, I'm pumped, ready to do this. A lot of times, whatever can go wrong usually goes wrong, or if there's a bolt that's there, it's usually stripped because you are recording, and then you're like, ah, darn it, expletive, and you turn the camera off, and then all this other stuff. You troubleshoot that. We're referring to as, there is a portion here on the brake side underneath the swing arm next to the pinch bolt that's located right here that we are referring to as a bump stop. It pretty much is going to help prevent the swing arm from dropping any further. Go ahead and shave that off. And then on the clutch side, you're gonna need to shave off pretty much a portion of the frame to make it more flat instead of more curved. So essentially, here's how it looks now, kind of a bit of a curve. And so what we're gonna do is shave off this corner and make it straight, so that way the swing arm is free to move and independent on its own. And instead of just getting an up movement, we'll be getting an up and down movement. Now, what's the added benefit of a taller shock? Couldn't really tell you. We're looking for just a little bit more clearance, a little bit more height. That's just something that I like to do because we were in Colorado. We did have the bunking shock extension on our stock shock, as well as our plus 1.5 damper rods from Tracker Die. We hit a pothole, we bottomed out, and I wasn't really too fan of that. And I also like to explore some places that are off-road, a couple areas that have rock, where I have to ride off a curb or maybe even pop up where you kind of go up to the curb, let the clutch out, give a little bit of gas and it pops it. I don't want it to bottom out. Also, it just looks super dope. And then again for track, once we start getting more aggressive, because even with the body posture that we were getting faster, we were improving. I do foresee us possibly scraping some hard parts is going to help prevent that. Again, you can only go so tall before the bike reaches the maximum point on your tires, and then it's going to eventually not have any more friction or that tire patch and you're on the low side. But that day is farther down the line, but again, it is on the horizon at some point. So that was our reasoning for it. And you don't have to do all this. This is mostly just because we're messing around. We're going to be also planning for another video. We have a set of Kuriokin fog lights. We have both spot and flood, so shout out to Kuriokin. Now that we moved forward from that super long intro, I appreciate y'all. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you find any value from today's video, hit that subscribe button. And while you're there, bump on over, hit that bell to be notified of any future videos when they drop, as soon as they drop. Cool. Connor, you're real high speed today. I know, I've been super excited. We've done a lot to the bike. We have a couple of videos in the pipeline. We just need to get at them and finishing off the bike. Ha 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 ha. Bada bing, bada boom, baby. All right, so here is where the tab was. You can see that it's been ground down. We were using a Dremel because we didn't have a grinder. Just been using that and it's taking forever. So shout out to Isaac for letting us borrow his grinder. And so that's the tab that you're gonna be grinding down. There's the pinch bolt on the bottom. So the way you can find it on your bike if you have an 18 plus Softail is going to be to locate this pinch bolt here on the bottom. You'll be able to find it if you just look close enough. And then here is the area that we were talking about where we were just grinding our little life away with the Dremel. It was taking forever, where it's just a fraction of material that needs to be removed. So pretty much just make this extremely straight. There's a little bit of material here on the back end. And then it should allow us, because that's the only area that's catching, but we're gonna go ahead and just add a little bit more of material shaved off that end. So here's how it looks. See how it kind of has a little bit of an elbow versus to this side now, where it's got less of that curve, but we need it to be a lot flatter. So we're just gonna continue and grind that down. That's why you always keep old GoPros. That should be some dope footage, but it burned that front. Oh shit. Ah! Almost there. So I'll try to show you as best here that there's some clearance right here. You can see it, nice and flat, all that. But then it makes contact near that tip top, so we're just gonna shave it a little bit more. And that should help out. The whole reason for us starting to shave the swing arm was so that way it would allow us the ability to drop the tire a little bit, where I think that might actually be more than enough of what we need. So that way we can measure the distance of the shock, top mounting point to the bottom. Because what I don't want to do is, say I get a shock at 14 inches because I think that's a close approximate of where I want it. The shock comes in, mount it up, sit on the bike, and it's like, I probably could have gone 14.25, 14 and a half. So I don't want that. Or say I go 15 inch because in my head, sure that might work, because my dyno was a 14 and a quarter. I loved it. It was a perfect height because we had +2 or +2 in the front. I can never remember. And And I did like that. So we're kind of trying to go that same height, but it's just difficult to gauge just measuring, because even if you go higher than 13.7, you are gonna have to do what we did, so that way you get a little bit more room for the swing arm to maneuver. And now I can measure the eyelet. So pretty much what I'm gonna do right now is get a measuring tape, measure the bottom eyelet to the top, see what that distance is. If we can get to 14.5, sure, that's probably the most I'm gonna go, because with monoshocks it's super weird. Every 1/4 inch to the shock adds an inch of bike lift. And when we were trying to figure it out pre all this, I put it on top of a 2x4. It's about 1.5 inches height for the overall bike. So I put it on there with the help of Trey and Oscar, sat on it, it felt good. I was able to still stand on it where I was planting the ball of my feet on the ground. It wasn't a full flat foot, but it was just enough where if I wore boots, I'd still be able to flat foot, it'd be perfect. And that way it would help level the bike out, because currently it sits with the back end is a little bit sagged. I'm trying to just make that completely even. And the best way to do it, the most accurate way, is to actually measure how the bike sits as best as I can. Once I measure the distance between the bottom mounting point and the top, and then we're done doing all this grinding that we've done. I'm just gonna piece everything back together, do what we just talked about, lift the bike back up once everything's back on. And then I'm gonna put the seat, sit on it, and it's gonna be on the lift, because my feet can touch the edge of it, and it'll give me a closer idea to where I can call, hey, I want 14.25, 14.5, and then order the shock, wait for it to come in, get it in, install it, and we live in the high life, baby. We cruising up tall, we donking, because everything here in Texas is lit. Y'all know how we do already. We measured the bottom of the eyelet, mounting point to the top. If I can find that measuring tape that I keep. I set the measuring tape down, and there's about the center. So that's at 0. At the bottom is, it's actually not 15, it's probably 14 7/8. I think that's gonna be way more than enough, because as it sits now, it sits super low. That the bike, yeah, that's dope. So what we're gonna do now is just piece everything together, get everything. We're gonna clean up some of this area here. We're gonna take off the swing arm again, so that way we can clean. Since we have all this off now, we have the opportunity to really get into these hard to reach areas. We're gonna go ahead and clean them, that way they're fresh. This is an extra step, you don't have to do it, but I figured why not since we're here. And then we're gonna start piecing everything together. That we had to remove our muffler so we could get access to this bolt. We had the bunking crash bars. That's interesting. We're gonna talk about it at a later video. It's done. We have ground the swing arm. We took off the stop for the swing arm. We're gonna call it the bump stop. It was definitely a little bit sketch where I was a little hesitant going into it, and I messaged Julio. He's done it on his Softail Fat Bob, and he was kind of my guidance where I asked, because initially I was gonna start shaving part of the swing arm, and that just seemed a little bit, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. So then I messaged him, I was like, hey, would you mind telling me what you shaved on the clutch side? That way I can get an idea. And if you can, any photos would be greatly appreciated. Sure enough, he was more than kind enough to shoot on over a couple photos and let me know how he did it. And then it was pretty straightforward. I also want to give you a huge shout out to Isaac for letting me borrow his angle grinder. We just had a Dremel and it was taking forever. But we will not be having the shock just yet. We ended up having Juan and Oscar come on over to help me with the shock, with removing the lower bolt for the shock and kind of having them be hands-on as we lifted the bike with the scissor jack, and we lifted it up and dropped the swing arm now that we had the extra room clearance from shaving the frame for that swing arm to drop, and then we can see just how long we wanted for the shock. That currently we're running the OEM FXLR shock with a bunking extension. It puts you just under 13.5 inches. So what we ended up doing is removing the lower bolt and having the shock just kind of move freely on the bottom and kind of lifted it. And we lifted the bike so the swing arm dropped, and we measured from the top, the center of the top mounting point to the center of the bottom mounting point, and we measured the distance between the two. I thought 15 inches was going to be a little bit too tall. Sure enough, it was. That we could have gone away with it, but we would have been tiptoeing on the very tip of our toes, and it just would not have been comfortable. Or if we're on a decline, incline in traffic, it's not conducive for safe riding, because we probably would have dropped it at some point. And we decided to bump it up a little bit further, and we settled on 14.5 inches. I hit up Hardcore Cycles, let them know that's the shock length I'm looking to get. They're gonna go ahead and place the order, and then within an additional 2-week lead time from Russ Wernemont, RWD, we're gonna be getting our shock some point in the near future. And as soon as we get it in, be sure to do a video and y'all can check it out, take tons of photos. So be sure and check out the Instagram and give it a follow, because that is usually where we spam all the photos, because I love my bike and I love sharing it with y'all. Well, everybody, that's gonna do it for the end of this video. Now that we have the swing arm cut, notched, and shaved, well, the frame, we went ahead and got the measurement from eyelet to eyelet. We decided on 14.5 inches for the custom Russ Wernemont shock. Now, the cool thing that many didn't know that I'm coming across as I tell them how the custom shock works, that if you email Russ Wernemont, go to their website, and you can find them in the contact section where you want to email them or give them a call, and then just let them know your question. Hey, I saw that Connor did a custom linked shock. Can I get more information? Pretty much that you can get a custom linked shock to your liking for the same price as their regular shock. And that's for mono shocks. I believe it may be the same with their dual shocks, like for the V-twin, for the Dynas and Sportsters and Baggers, etc. Timeout, let's get this. At no additional cost. That's if you go through RWD themselves. That I'm ordering my shock through Hardcore Cycles, since they're the homies and they've been more than supportive on the channel. So we're doing it through them. But unfortunately, if you go through your local dealer, you may incur a custom order fee. So it still rides normal. Nothing really different about how it sits, because the shock is holding the swing arm, so it's not going to be willy-nilly just all up and down. But now that we do have the clearance, and now we do have clearance to get a longer shock, that's going to make it a little bit cooler once we lift it. I'm curious to see how much Michael Jackson we're going to do.